Well, hello once again. It is Dan Alborn with Jackie Conkle, and this is the Appleton REIA podcast. We are here to help educate you to become better investors in today's investing world. And today, we talked a little bit about deal evaluation on our last podcast. I think this almost fits perfectly into this episode.
Yeah, we almost started talking about this on the last one. We just had to make this our next topic. Deal structuring is really the next thing you need.
Absolutely. And this is important because once you have your numbers and you kind of know what's going to cost to rehab, what can I actually sell this property for? What can I make on it? Obviously, that's have to be part of the equation. Now we have to figure out, well, how do we present this to our seller? And for intents and purposes, what we're talking about today, these are non-MLS properties because that's a whole different beast than what we're going to talk about today. This is basically a seller has contacted you based upon the marketing that you've submitted out to them, and they've reached out to you via email, phone call, Facebook, however you do what you do. And now you're at their table and you're about to present a deal. But before we get to that point, there's some important things we need to do on the front end.
Right, because first you're going to take that phone call. Most likely it's a phone call, right?
Yes.
They're going to get your letter or they'll see some advertising or whatever, and they're going to reach out through a phone call, or they'll send you an email with their phone number so you can call them, right?
Yeah.
So it all starts with that phone call, and that's when you really begin building rapport. And that's something that you carry all the way through is the rapport that you have with that seller. But it really starts with figuring out why are they selling? What problem can I help them solve? Why aren't they calling a realtor right now? Right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the gurus get this wrong because a lot of times what they do is they give you the list of questions to say, all right, how many bedrooms do you have? How many baths do you have? What's the square footage? I'd almost say throw out those questions because you can find that information in today's world so easily, whether through public records, through
call the assessor.
Yeah, call the assessor. You could call an agent, and there might be an old MLS sheet. So the reality is that's just general information that's really not all that important. It is important, but it's not the key to getting the deal done. And it's ultimately, like you said, Jackie, building the rapport, understanding why are you in this position? Why did you raise your hand to say, hey, I need your help? And I like your point, why aren't you using a realtor? I ask that question a lot of times to my sellers. Well, why aren't you just listing the home? And then the big thing is just let them talk.
That is so key. Ask them a question like that. None of these yes/no questions, right? Like, why didn't you call a realtor? Why are you calling me? What do you need right now? And let them just tell you. And sometimes they'll say right out, well, I don't like realtors. Okay, so you get to throw that back later when you make your offer, right? And say, listen, you don't have to work with a realtor. There's no commissions. There's no inspections and all that stuff you said you didn't want. But there's also, sometimes they'll say, well, I didn't do that because I need to sell it fast. Or I didn't do that because the house needs a lot of repair and I don't have the time or the money to do it. Or fill in the blank, right? They're going to start telling you why. And then you have to take those whys to be their problem. And now you need to be the one that gives the solution to those problems.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying. I think if you're on the phone, you need to be taking diligent notes, writing down specifically what they said.
Yeah.
If they said, I need to sell fast, or I'm in this situation, which it's going to be going to sheriff's sale in a week. These are things that you want to write back. Pair it back to them when you're talking. So you're saying if we can help you buy this home in a week to prevent it from sheriff's sale, we could probably come together on a deal pretty quickly. So what you just did is took exactly their words. Even if they say it differently than you would, say it exactly the same way they did because you're going to parrot that. One other quick thing. This is something that I've learned, and it's tough for me because I have a radio background, and one of the things that you don't ever have on radio is what's called dead air. So I have a natural bent to, if someone's talking, as soon as they're done speaking, I want to say something a second later. But in this scenario, when you're asking an open-ended question like Jackie was saying, and you're getting the why out, let there be a moment of dead air. Because what's going to happen, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel awkward. But you're not going to speak first. Because if what'll happen is that next thing that's going to come out of the seller's mouth is going to be liquid gold. In the sense that they're going to tell you something because they feel the need to speak. So they're going to continue to talk. Worst case scenario, they come back and say, are you still there? All you need to say is, yeah, actually, I thought you were still talking and I was writing down some notes. So you're not going to look like you're incompetent by any means, but giving them a little bit more leeway to continue to talk can be just crucial in really getting them to tell you why they're looking to sell. And this also, when you're figuring out their why, you get to figure out their motivation level too, Jackie. I mean,
you learn so much.
Are they kicking the tires, or do they really need to sell now?
Yeah, you really learn. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes when you say, why are you calling me? They're like, well, I got your note, or I saw your sign, or whatever, and they're just thinking, well, I just wanted to see what this is all about. How does this work? Okay. And then you give them real quick, this is how it works, and say, is that something sounds like you'd be interested in?
Right.
And I always tell them, listen, we're not retail buyers. This is a business for us. This is how I feed my kids. Right. So we're definitely not going to be the highest offer. We will be the fastest and the easiest.
Right.
And sometimes that works for people, and sometimes that doesn't. So where are you feeling like, have you thought about what you need to get for the house? Well, I owe X amount. That's where they come out with that kind of stuff. And you're like, oh, well, I've been buying houses in that neighborhood for about this amount. And I don't know what you're saying right now sounds a little retail. Is that something that you're going to need to stick on? Because I might need to just have to tell you that a better choice would be to call a realtor. I don't think I'm your best option, and then make that decision. Now you're not wasting your time looking at the house.
That's huge. And a lot of early new investors spend a lot of time looking at properties that just they're just not going to be a deal. Yeah. So if you can figure out the why on the top side of things without asking all the generic questions, and then making the appointment and go looking at it, taking all the time and effort, and early on, that could be hours.
Right.
And then to come to find out that your number's at 40 and they weren't going to take anything less than 120, why even have that appointment?
Yeah.
So if
and
you're not
get kicked in the teeth in the meantime, right? With making that lowball offer. Oh my goodness.
And early on, your confidence level already isn't probably where it needs to be.
Right.
So having the confidence in making a strong offer, understanding their why and explaining this. And I think the other thing that you do a very good job with, Jackie, is that you're very transparent. You're just honest and genuine with them. We're not going to be your best offer, but we are going to be this.
Yeah.
And if that's what you're looking for, will be very, very helpful. So along with the parroting, that when you're repeating back the words, the other thing is you're building this rapport is when you're actually sitting tableside, having a conversation with someone, you want to be able to pick up on the nonverbals. They say that only 7% of our communication, Jackie, is actually the words that we say, and the other 93 is the nonverbal. Isn't that just crazy? I know.
Yeah.
So that's so important when you're sitting tableside again with a seller, noticing how they are positioning themselves in a chair. Are their arms folded? Are they sitting a certain way? You want to what's called mirror or match them. Tony Robbins talks about that. Also, how are they speaking? Myself, naturally, I tend to speak at a high rate of speed. But if I'm talking to a 90-year-old elderly woman who's looking to solve a problem with selling her home, I need to be very aware that I'm ultimately going to slow down the way that I'm speaking and be a little bit more clear and concise. Because if you're talking really fast and they talk slowly,
you're a shyster.
Yeah, they're going to think something's wrong, right? And the red flag is going to go up, and you're not building rapport. You're building walls. And the whole point of building this conversation is that we can tear down the walls, that they can feel comfortable and confident to ultimately work with us as a solution.
Right, absolutely. And in asking all the different questions and things like that too, you're also going to find out most likely if they have a mortgage, because you don't just come right out and say, do you have a mortgage? But just saying, well, hopefully you don't owe too much on the house or something like that. In conversation, things come up and they'll just say, oh yeah, no, I don't owe a mortgage on it or anything like that. Or you could even say, well, it sounds like if they're saying, and you ask them, well, did you have a number in mind of what you're looking to get? Sometimes they'll say, well, I still owe X amount. Or you could just say, do you have a number in mind, or, how much you still owe on it? And they'll at least say yes or no sometimes. And then that they have a mortgage, which helps us when we come to the point of wanting to make multiple offers to see which one that they'll take. So again, asking them questions why they need to sell, you can throw that back later when you're making the offer. You can say, okay, you said you needed this, and so if I could give you all of that, even if you don't say it that way, that's basically how you're giving it back. Yeah.
I love that statement. And you're not even telling me you're going to do that, but you're saying, if I could give you X and solve your problems, it sounds like we'd be able to come to a deal.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's not even really being super salesman-y. You're repeating back their words, and you're saying, if I can solve this, it's going to happen, right? It's just, it seems to make sense. One thing I want to tag into what you're saying, Jackie, is that if they're not being forthcoming and telling you necessarily there's a mortgage, if they give you a price and let's say, oh, well, we need to get $80,000, I a lot of times like to ask the question, well, how did you come to that number?
Yeah.
Right? And then from there, they might say, well, we owe 75 on it, and we want to
Right.
make a little bit of money at the end of the
Or
day.
we got to pay off the truck too. Yeah.
Correct. So if they don't come straight out and say that there is or isn't a mortgage, which is an important question because
Right.
that's got to get paid first at the end of the day, that's another way you can get that out of a seller by just kind of having them to give some depth to why they came to that number.
Right.
Which is another good way of just figuring out their mindset and motivation too.
And sometimes I like to just say, do you need all the cash right away? And they'll be like, well, first I got to pay off the mortgage, and that's, and so that's kind of what it looks like too. When we get to the whole idea of making multiple offers. So we're not just saying we buy cash and here's our cash offer,
Right.
but coming up with 2 or 3 different solutions. I actually have a pretty cool worksheet that I like to use, and I had the seller fill it out themselves. And it says, this is what you get for the house, and then you subtract all the, the costs and blah, 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 what it looks like if they sell it traditionally with a realtor.
Yep.
So they can get what their real number is. Because an agent might have told them, well, we can get 120 for this. I say, okay, well, if you think that, let's just start, and let's see what you're really going to get.
Right.
Because there's some things that must be repaired, and any home inspector is going to find
Absolutely.
it. So let's just line item this out right now, because all they can hear is that 120. They're not really thinking about all the things that have to come off.
Yep.
And one of the lines on there is for them to put the mortgage. So you got to subtract that regardless
true.
of who you sell to.
Yep.
And if they put a number in that line, well, now they just told you what the mortgage is, but it was a really, comfortable way of doing it.
For sure.
And so, for an example, I had one a few years back, and the gentleman was retired. He was in his later 70s, and he was just done with this property. It was a single family home, but he was renting it out. And he had hired some contractors to come in and do some work, and he paid them in advance. You and I both know that's right?
Don't ever do that. Nugget to take away from this podcast. Don't ever do that.
Nope. They took the money and ran, which is shame on them. The guy's like 78 years old. But, of course, going through the process and finding out that he owns the property free and clear. He's had it for a while. And he just wanted it. He's like, I'm just done. I can't do the work. I can't spend any more money and give this to anybody else.
Right.
And I just want to be done. And knowing at that point that he didn't have a mortgage, I just said, well, is there any, do you need the money right away? Or is this something that we can work through? Because I'd like to give you as high of an offer as I can. And sometimes we can work together, and I can actually give you more money because I won't need to go and borrow it from my private investors. Yeah. And he's like, well, I need to pay off my truck. I'm like, okay. I'm like, so is that the only emergency need? The right-of-way need? He's like, well, it's not an emergency. I just want to get that paid off. And then the rest of it, I'm just going to, I'm going to keep it in the bank. Okay, so what do you need to pay the truck off? He's like, I just want $10,000. I'm like, okay, so if we were able to...
There's that if statement again. I love it. Very powerful.
If we were able to take this over right where it is with the contractor who kind of started tearing things apart, took your money and ran and left all this stuff here.
Yep.
If you didn't have to do anything else here, and he had a little tiny red and white for sale by owner sign in the yard, right? He wasn't even trying hard because he didn't want to pay commissions.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I said, and you didn't have to deal with an agent or anything else. Inspection's already done. We've already come through. These are our numbers. If we could get you $10,000 at closing, but you would not get paid the rest until we finished the renovation and resold it, but a max of 6 months. And we'll sign a contract with that. You'll record a mortgage, and I can help you with all of that. P.S., guys, if you need help with that, that's where you might want to step into a joint venture or a coaching type
for sure.
situation. But I said, would that make sense to you? And he's like, well, yeah, show me what that looks like. So we made him an all cash offer. We made him an offer where he holds a note for everything, and he gives us the money to renovate. Because, who would want that offer, right?
Right, yeah.
But actually, that was our third offer. Our second offer was give him the $10,000 at closing, but he carries back a note for all the rest.
Sure.
We put the money in to renovate it. Then when it's sold, he gets paid off the rest, minus the $10,000. And then the last offer was, okay, you hold the note and you lend us the money for the renovations. Now we can offer even more because you can take 0% interest on all that. But if you have cash sitting in the bank, So it's kind of one of these situations where you say, here's my offer A, B, and C. And they're looking at these 3 offers going, well, I don't like A because I'd like my 10 grand. And I don't like C because I'm not going to give you money to renovate it too. I'm not doing that.
Right.
But B looks pretty good. They forget that there is an offer D, which is go fly kite Jackie.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
I'm not taking any of those offers. And that's what we were able to do. We gave him the $10,000 at closing, and 3 months later, renovation was done, and it was sold, like closed, done. So it wasn't even a full 6 months. Within 3 months, he had all of his money, and we were able to give him a higher offer because we weren't paying points and interest to a private money
but
lender.
the key to that deal was that you ultimately gave him what he wanted. You found out that his big deal was that $10K pull, right? So you structured one of the options to get that $10,000 in maybe a different way, whether it be at close or perhaps, maybe it's at the end of the transaction, but it solved the need. You found out the why, you crafted a solution around that why, and that's why it got accepted. And when you do stuff like that, your deals will get accepted more times than not than a majority of the offers out there, because a majority of what you see today is just, well, here's my cash offer.
Yeah.
And that's what they train people to do, which is good and fine. But in today's competitive market, you need to be more creative if you want to do more deals. That is just the straight up truth. And if you can get good at this now, when the market does change, it still applies. You're still gonna have even more deals because there won't be as many people fighting for them.
And remember, there's 3 things he told me. He just needed the 10 grand. He also told me that he didn't want to pay any commissions with his little red and white sign, right? He didn't want to deal with a realtor. And he also was done with these contractors. So if I was, I'm like, listen, you don't have to do the rest of the work. I'm going to take it just like it is. I know that bathroom's torn apart. I'm good with it. You don't ever have to come here again. And those were the things. You just throw him back the 3 problems he gave me with a solution, and he was like, done.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. You're going to have a very high success rate by doing that. Now, so we get to this point, we make the offer, let's say it doesn't get accepted. Well, now what?
Yeah.
I mean, there could be a variety of reasons, but I think the key here, and this is taught a lot in marketing, but is the follow-up. You need to do the follow-up when it comes to these offers, because if you put an offer in today, and let's say you kind of keep in your file to look back on the property, 14 days from now, 21 days from now, and it's still not sold, this is ultimately where you need to then maybe reach back out to that seller, right? And keep your records too. That's
oh my gosh, it's so important to keep your numbers and know what offer or offers you made them so that you can just kind of pick up where you left off. I literally yesterday just got a call out of the blue. I have not spoken with this seller for over a year, Dan.
Crazy.
I just remembered that. And she called. Now, when I followed up with her last, she said that her husband said that they could get more for the house.
Sure, right.
That they could get more for the house. This is over a year ago, and she's still holding it. She was so frustrated when I met her. She didn't want anything to do with this property anymore. And here she is still sitting on it.
Right.
So now I can go back, pull up my numbers, see what I offered her, because keeping those records. I mean, you'd think after a year you could throw them away, but don't.
No, you want to keep that. At least it's a solid base. You may still need to go back through the home to kind of, again, sharpen the pencil. Maybe more things have happened to the home because it's been sitting vacant for 12 months. So there could be more costs. So you have to kind of use that as your baseline. But
absolutely,
it can be comparable. I mean, I had a deal last year where the same thing happened. The guy at the one time, he was going to sell it to their sibling or their son or daughter, and then their son and daughter couldn't do it. And then they called me back and said, hey, is that offer still good? So I had to go back to my file and be like, yeah, let me just take a quick look. And it worked out. So that's so important.
It really is. And if all this stuff is just too much for you,
right,
always remember you can joint venture. I know that a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, I can still remember being brand new and thinking, oh my gosh, when anybody even just talked about creating a note, having the seller carry back a note, I was like, what's a note? What do you mean? And now it's just such old hat. Dan and I fall into this trap a lot of times where we talk and we forget sometimes, Dan, that we're maybe talking over the head of a brand new person.
Right.
But please remember, there are so many investors locally who will work with you, whether it's a joint venture deal or, we even have a coaching program.
Yeah, and that's the great thing. Whether you're where you're at in your real estate journey, whether you're brand new or looking to get to that next level, something that Jackie and I have just started doing, and we love doing this. We love teaching you all the tricks, secrets, tips, stuff that we're giving you in just little pockets here in the podcast. You get full access to both Jackie, Brett, and myself, where we take you by the hand, one-on-one coaching, and really set up your business effectively at the start. get you an effective marketing plan, and start having people call you for deals.
Yeah.
And then we, again, take you through the process. Well, how do you evaluate the deal? We go there with you. We teach you how to do this with the whole point that eventually you don't need us. So it's a one-on-one coaching experience that I think is top level. And if that's something that you're interested in, it's very easy to find out more information.
Yeah. And again, even at the local Appleton REIA meetings, there's so much opportunity for networking and things like that. But you can definitely meet Dan. You can meet myself and my husband, Brett, and just kind of see who we are and what we do, and maybe even sit down for just an interview process.
Yeah, a discovery conversation, we like to call it. Make sure that it's going to work for you, and conversely that you'll work with us. We want to make sure this is a mutual beneficial relationship that we can really help you. If we can't help you, we'd be the first people to say, maybe this isn't going to work.
Right.
And likewise, you want to make sure that, hey, I really jive with Jacci, Brett, and Dan, and we want to make sure that this can happen. So, yeah, you can find out information about that at the REIA. You can come talk to us specifically. But really, if you want to fast track your real estate investing career, this would be a great opportunity to do that. And you can find out more information at AppletonREIA.com. That's Appleton, REIA.com, to become part of that, or at least have that initial discovery call.
Yeah, how many deals I missed out in the beginning, not knowing how to properly structure a multiple offer, or properly structure an offer that really fit my seller, because I was so tunnel visioned on just the one cash offer, thinking that's what everybody wants. And for some people, it freaks them out if you say close fast, because they're like, oh my gosh, I can't close next week. Like, I got to get all this stuff out. Like, I'm not ready.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to realize that it's all cash and close when you're ready.
Yeah.
Some people want it fast, but some people really just want to be on their timetable. So
absolutely. And a
lot of stuff to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last thing about the coaching is that we help take the fear out of it. A lot of these things, if you're a new investor, things we're talking about in the podcast, you might be like, yeah, I understand you, Jacci and Dan, but I just still can't do that. So sometimes having someone to kind of guide you, hold your hand through the process, it can be the difference of, like you said, making a deal or not making a deal. You might not even make an offer on a potential deal that's sitting in your lap, but you're too afraid.
Yeah.
So if you had an expert who could be in your back pocket that could help structure the deal and help present the deal, I'm sure that could be helpful for you. So that's what this coaching program does. So, well, that about does it for this edition of the Appleton REIA podcast. A lot of nuggets in today's lesson or teaching. I don't know what we're going to call this session. It's great when we talk too, because sometimes I'm reminded, oh yeah, that this or that or the other. So we're always learning, and that's what we're here to do, to help share the learning process with you and educate you guys along the way. So stay tuned. You can subscribe on Spreaker. You can subscribe on iTunes. Also, I believe on SoundCloud. So all you need to do is go on there, and you can find out when the latest podcast happens. Otherwise, you can simply go to AppletonREIA.com and find the latest episode there. We'll do this again soon, Jacci. How does that sound?
That sounds awesome. I'm looking forward to the next one.
All right. You guys have yourself a great one. This has been the Appleton REIA Podcast.
Bye.